E.
Good morning, everyone. If you could find your way to your seats, please. Good morning and welcome. We just have a few more folks joining us here. Good morning. My name is Su-Ling Ching, and it is my honor to be the President and CEO of the Ottawa Board of Trade. On behalf of Mayor Mark Sutcliffe, the Ottawa Board of Trade, and the Ottawa Business Journal, welcome to the Mayor's Breakfast. I hope everyone here had a wonderful long weekend. Yes? Very good. I am joined this morning by my co-presenter, Michael Curran, the president and publisher of the Ottawa Business Journal, our premier business media outlet. We are both all grateful for you to be here with us this morning. We are happy to be gathered here in City Hall in beautiful downtown Ottawa. Ottawa is built on unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. The peoples of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We honor the peoples and land of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. We honor all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. I want to start this morning with a special welcome and thank you to the Ottawa Board of Trade board members who have joined us here early this morning, Brendan McGinty, and our guest speaker today, David Coletto. Thank you both for your steadfast leadership and dedication to our community. I would also like to acknowledge our Ottawa Board of Trade ambassadors, Linda McCallum, John Nelson, Aidan Dumont, Jeff Snyder, David Dunlop, Walter Noble, and Jared Goldsmith for being here today. These Ottawa Board of Trade members volunteered to welcome our new members, ensuring that they maximize their benefits. So we really appreciate you guys being here today. Please join me in welcoming our City Council members who've joined us this morning: Councillor Hill, Councillor Carr, Councillor Tierney, Councillor Hubley, Councillor King, Councillor Lowe, and Councillor Kitts, thank you for your ongoing leadership and for being here with us this morning. I wish to acknowledge our pillar partner in the Ottawa Board of Trade, Enbridge Gas. Thank you for your support in elevating the important advocacy and economic development work of the Board of Trade on behalf of our business community. It is truly a pleasure, not to be taken for granted, to be in this room this morning, a room filled with business leaders, elected officials, and community champions who have come together to break some bread, to connect and contemplate the future of our city. Just an average weekday morning in Ottawa. Our world is feeling quite unpredictable, from rising global tensions to the continued volatility of our largest trading partner. However, we know that uncertainty invites innovation and opportunity. We can choose to meet it with the courage, collaboration, and commitment to action on the things that we control. One of those things is our advocacy work, and it's working. Just this month, we saw real progress at Queen's Park with action on internal trade barriers, something we and our chamber colleagues across the country have been championing for a long time. It is proof that smart, targeted policy can unlock Canada's economic potential, and a reminder that when we speak with a united voice, that we can really make things happen. Another opportunity is our upcoming federal election, which matters deeply. The decisions made in the months ahead will shape our democracy and our economy for years to come. That is why we are asking every business leader to be informed, engaged, and focused on the candidates and parties whose platforms are aligned with our local and national economic priorities. You can find our Board of Trade platform at buildupottawa.ca to help you make some empowered choices. And of course, we have some experts here today to help us as well. At the same time, we continue to raise Ottawa's profile on the global stage, engaged in the upcoming B7 Summit and City Nation Place Conference, demonstrating leadership in the nation's capital on matters like resiliency, energy, and economic development. And speaking of raising our profile, can we take a moment to celebrate the inaugural direct flight from Ottawa to Heathrow? I know Sam LaPratt is very happy about that, and you'll be traveling, I'm sure. A huge thank you to the Ottawa International Airport and Air Canada for making this possible. A note to everyone here, please spread the word. If you are planning to travel, fly out of Ottawa. That is how we get direct flights that attract the investment, talent, and visitation that grow our city. Everybody turn around and pinky promise. All right. We recently had the opportunity to take that flight ourselves on a mission to London with our Ottawa Unlimited partners, Invest Ottawa and Ottawa Tourism, to showcase our city, build connections, and attract investment. Just one more way that the Board of Trade and our economic partners are working together to take bold action to drive Ottawa's global competitiveness. Today, we're gearing up for our sold-out annual Ottawa City Building Summit, a platform where we discuss all the things that make Ottawa strong and look for new opportunities. Thank you to all of our speakers and sponsors for helping to make this possible. And just announced was the inaugural Ottawa Innovation Week, which is to take place the second week in June, and designed to highlight the forward-thinking and forward-doing that is happening across our city in every sector. You are invited, every one of you, to get involved, and you can find more information at investottawa.ca. So, yes, the challenges are very real, but so is our potential. The Ottawa Board of Trade exists to bring people together, to create the conditions where businesses thrive, talent flourishes, and ideas become impact. So please get involved, be a member, join a committee, lend your voice to our advocacy work. In the end, our greatest strength has always been our ability to come together with purpose and pride in this incredible city that we all call home. So let's keep building, let's keep believing, and finally, repeat after me. Go, Sens, go. kick off this morning's breakfast, let's recognize the great organizations that support this speaker series. Our lead sponsor, Hydro Ottawa, Algonquin College, the Westin Ottawa, RBC, Edelman, Commissionaires Ottawa, Enbridge, Ottawa Senators Hockey Club, our global partners, Oakwood and Casino Lac Limi, our AV partner, Ottawa Print Services, our gift sponsor, Inman Harden, our coffee sponsor, Capital Office Interiors, and our breakfast sponsor, La Cité. A big thank you to all of our sponsors for making this possible. It is now my pleasure to invite His Worship Mayor Mark Sutcliffe to the podium to welcome our special guest.
Thank you, Suling. Bonjour tout le monde. And Suling, thank you for everything you're doing. Really appreciate all the efforts of the Board of Trade right now at this really crucial time for our local economy. Merci à tous de vous être joints à nous ce matin. C'est un plaisir de vous accueillir à l'Hôtel de Ville. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Great to welcome you back to Ottawa City Hall. I hope you had a wonderful Easter long weekend and enjoyed the time with family and friends. Avant de présenter notre invité ce matin, je voudrais faire une brève mise au point. Just before I introduce our guest today, I wanted to give a quick update on a few things that are happening at this very busy and interesting time in our city. Of course, we're all excited about the Senators being in the playoffs, and Game 2 is tonight. It's already been a great boost for our local economy. I was walking around on the Sens Mile on Sunday night, and it will be open again tonight, and the atmosphere was amazing. It was really terrific to see so many people gathered in Senators jerseys and people really enjoying the experience. There were a couple of people there in Maple Leafs jerseys as well, but we drowned them out very quickly. So we're doing everything we can to support local business at this very volatile and uncertain time, and the Sens Mile has helped with that a little bit. We raised the Senators flag at City Hall last week. It's flying outside the Heritage Building. Nous faisons tout ce qui est en notre pouvoir pour soutenir les entreprises locales en cette période très volatile et incertaine. And just last week, we approved the extension of the 15% business tax discount for 2025. So that's 15% discount on property taxes for small businesses that was introduced during the pandemic, but we, with all of the uncertainty, we extended it again for another year. And that will apply to about 10,000 small businesses in our community and will save them an average of $3,700 per year. So that is significant. We're also working very hard to bring more healthcare professionals, including family doctors, to our city. It is a provincial responsibility, of course, medicine and healthcare, but we have to do everything we can to help. We're working hard to create the conditions to build more homes in our city. We have a new task force, including the Board of Trade, that is looking at streamlining processes at City Hall and other measures that will help stimulate more home building in our city. We just approved the handing over of 8 city properties to not-for-profit organizations that will use them to build affordable housing. So that's 8 more sites where affordable housing will be built in our city. And of course, the big thing that's happening in the next week is the federal election. Le grand événement de la semaine prochaine est l'élection fédérale. And as you know, the main focus has been on tariffs and trade. But I want to make sure that Ottawa's priorities, our local priorities, continue to be front and center during the campaign. The Mayor of Gatineau and I wrote a letter to the party leaders about our objectives, about the challenges we're facing, the unique challenges we face in Canada's capital region. And as you know, I've talked about this before, but over the past 5 years, the federal government has shortchanged the city by nearly $100 million in unpaid property taxes, leaving local taxpayers to make up the difference. They undervalue their properties and they pay less in property taxes to us as a result. So I'm calling on federal party leaders to commit to paying their fair share and also to support the revitalization of downtown Ottawa. And if you agree, and I hope you do, please sign the petition on my website. because we need to put all of our energy and effort behind this, and we need a strong show of support for this cause. We are going to talk about some downtown issues as well as the federal election with our guest this morning. Nous allons donc parler de certaines questions relatives au centre-ville et des élections fédérales avec notre invité ce matin. And I'll tell you, I have known David Coletto for more than 10 years, since he first launched Abacus Data. And everybody always teases him about this, but if you think he looks young now, you should have seen him then, 10 years ago. David was a regular guest on my radio show for many years, and I also had the pleasure of working with him as his business coach, and it was an absolute joy to watch David grow Abacus into the leading polling company in Canada today. And along the way, David has become one of the most respected voices in Canada on public opinion research. His research has touched almost every sector: health, education, transportation, technology, and more. And the thing that people forget about pollsters sometimes, about research companies, is you think of them in the context of federal elections and the work they do to survey how Canadians are feeling about political parties and about the major issues. But David and his team, of course, do a lot of work with business owners, helping them understand their markets, helping them understand the people that they're serving, their customers and their future customers. And David has really excelled at understanding the marketplace and providing that guidance and wisdom to his clients. And David, by the way, is a proud Carleton University graduate and a professor in the political management program, so he's also shaping the next generation of leaders in politics and public affairs. As Su-Ling mentioned, David is on the board of the Ottawa Board of Trade. He's also on the board of the Ottawa Riverkeeper, so he gives back to the community in many, many ways. And I'm looking forward to our conversation. So please join me in welcoming the CEO of Abacus Data, David Coletto. Thank you, David. Thank you for doing this. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Good. Thanks, Mayor, for having me.
So we are deep in the heart of this historic battle, and we're going to find out the outcome next week. Can you tell us who you think is going to win between the Senators and the Maple Leafs?
Well, obviously the Senators.
Yes.
You know, you sometimes have to fall a little behind to really get the momentum to move forward, and so you know, one setback is okay in a campaign. It's a long campaign.
Yes. Well, and in fact, the party that's ahead in the polls right now was pretty far behind at one point as well, right? So, what can you tell us about what's driving the outcomes in this election? Because I don't think we've ever seen anything like this before. 3 months ago, 4 months ago, we were clearly on a path towards one outcome, and now it appears we're on a path towards a very different outcome. A bunch of different things have changed, and obviously the election of Donald Trump and the not just the election of Donald Trump, but the tone towards Canada that he started taking has had a huge impact on this campaign. So can you just describe the circumstances that have led to this historic shift in public opinion?
Well, I think what happened was, first of all, most of the interesting stuff happened before the campaign actually started, right? And for much of 2023 and 2024, most Canadians, regardless of where you lived, how old you are, you know, what your kind of socioeconomic status was, were feeling that the things they needed in their life were really expensive, hard to get. If they had them, they were worried they were going to lose them. I describe it as having a scarcity mindset was really the prevailing view. And that meant, you know, incumbent governments basically everywhere were under pressure, and the Liberal government federally was no exception, right? At the end of December, only 12% of Canadians thought the federal Liberals deserved to be re-elected. We're now at a place today where I think they're the favorites to win this election. And what happened in between was Justin Trudeau resigned, Donald Trump did what Donald Trump has done, and Mark Carney emerged to really offer, I think, Canadians who were looking for security, a sense of that. And you saw the emergence of a new mindset that was really built around precarity, right? Where people were no longer deeply concerned. The cost of living is still the number one issue, but they're less worried about or thinking about who's going to provide me relief today, and much more focused on who's going to prevent it from getting worse, right? And I think that confluence of events fundamentally shifted a large part of the electorate to one where they were absolutely not going to give the Liberals another shot, to one where they became open-minded to hearing an alternative, and we're now at a place where it's still very close, but it does seem that what I was telling people 4 months ago, prepare for a Poilievre government, prepare for it, it's coming, it's pretty certain, no longer obviously seems as certain.
And how much do you expect the numbers to shift in the final 6 days of the campaign? I mean, you know, I voted on the weekend. I talked to some people this morning who voted on the weekend. A lot of people, there were huge lineups, so those votes are already in. Is there anything that could happen in the next few days that could change anything, or do you feel like people have made up their minds?
I think most people have made up their mind. I suspect we're going to see data today from Elections Canada that suggests maybe close to a quarter of people who could vote did vote already. So that's very much locking in, you know, whatever opinions people had before today. Campaigns can gain momentum in those last days. There's still, you know, about a third of people typically don't make up their mind until either the day of the vote or even walking into that polling place. And so there's still the potential for this to move. Oftentimes it usually benefits the party that's winning, the sort of bandwagon effect that you see that sort of pushes them just slightly farther than we thought they would get. But I don't see any evidence that anything's really changed. In fact, when you look at most of the polls over the course of this formal campaign period, nothing has actually moved all that much. It's been pretty static, that people have kind of, you know, thought of the leaders, thought of the issues, and not much has moved from that. I mean, Donald Trump has faded a little bit in terms of the top of mind that people say is their top issue, and that has benefited, I think, both the Conservatives and the NDP to some extent. But I don't expect to see much change. We did a survey right after the debates last week. We're going to release a new survey tomorrow that was taken over the weekend, and nothing in any of that data suggests that those debates or the conversations that most of us had probably over the weekend with family and friends has fundamentally shifted people from where they're intended to go prior to the weekend.
So are you able to make a prediction about the election? I mean, or you know, a qualified prediction of some sorts?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have numbers out tomorrow that shows the Liberals ahead by 3 nationally. What's really interesting is some of the demographic shifts, right? If you're over the age of 55, for the last 10 years, you were the hardest cohort for the Liberals to engage. You're much more resistant to anything Justin Trudeau was saying. Boomers have kind of embraced the Liberals and Mark Carney, and so I'm pretty confident that unless, again, pollsters always say this, unless something fundamentally changes, that we should see a Liberal government. I think the question now is, and there's some noise coming out of Quebec, is it tightening there? Is it not? Is it going to be a majority? Is it going to be a minority? Those are things that I think are still up in the air, but I would be very surprised if after the votes are counted on Monday, if the Conservatives do find a way to win more seats and win a government. But you never know.
Sure. And one of the dynamics that's really interesting in this election campaign is that it's not so much that the Conservative vote has gone down. If anything, they may get a bigger share of the popular vote than in the last election, but it's everybody else sort of moving over to the Liberals, including the NDP voters from previous elections. Can you just talk about that a bit?
Yeah, well, keep in mind, like 1 out of 2 people who said they voted NDP in the last federal election now say they're voting for a different party, with almost all of them going to the Liberals, right? The Bloc has seen its support drop some extent in Quebec, and most of that has moved to the Liberals. And so this is going to be one of those elections that we haven't seen in quite a long time, in which the top 2 parties could see the combined vote being greater than 80%, right? This binary choice that I think the circumstances has created. And you're right, in any other circumstance, a federal party leader that 40% of Canadians say they have a positive view of, who's almost able to get 40% of the vote, in the case of the Conservatives, Mr. Poilievre, would win. Mr. Harper won a majority with just 40% of the vote in 2011. So it isn't a collapse in the Conservative vote. This isn't a fundamental rejection of Pierre Poilievre, but what this is the rest of the electorate coming to the conclusion that the stakes are pretty high, and Mark Carney finds himself today as more popular than any federal leader at this point in a campaign, going back all the way to 2011, when Jack Layton was quite popular, even if he didn't win that election. So Mark Carney has been able to do something pretty remarkable in that he's introduced himself to the country. Most people, when he announced he was running for leader, only 9% of Canadians could recognize a photo of him. Showed a photo in our surveys and said, "Who is this?" Only 9% could say that's Mark Carney. Very quickly he became their prime minister, and he has a lot of appeal right now. So I think the dynamics of this is really interesting and fundamental, but the collapse, at least right now, of the NDP vote is the biggest reason why the Liberals find themselves in a place where they are.
You touched on something earlier that I have found interesting in this campaign, which is at the moment, and I'm generalizing here, but older voters are more likely to support the Liberals and younger voters are more likely to support the Conservatives, which is not historically how it's been. So what's going on there?
Well, I think it's younger Canadians remain, they're more likely to have this kind of scarcity mindset that I described earlier, right? They're still much more engaged in the here and now. You talked about housing and accelerating home building in the city. They say housing is substantially more likely to be one of their top issues. Donald Trump has also completely, and I say deranged because I was visiting my parents on the weekend in Toronto, and she is beyond herself upset about what happened in the US, right? And so when you look at all the data, whether it's consumer data on how Canadians are rejecting American everything, it's being driven primarily by boomers who I think are paying way more attention to the news, traditional news, than younger Canadians. And so are thinking their issue set is different, and that is animating them to be much more open to voting Liberal, whereas younger Canadians, particularly young men, it's a really interesting dynamic, are moving in a very different direction, and they feel that this world has kind of left them behind, and this election has not actually talked enough about the fact that they feel insecure about their future job prospects or their ability to buy a home or afford the rent. Still is something that hasn't been solved or doesn't feel like it's being solved. And so that generational divide, I think, is a big part of this election, even though, if you watch the news, it feels like all we're talking about is Donald Trump. That's not what all Canadians are talking about.
And just on that, I wonder how it's, if you have any thoughts on how it's going to play out over time, because as you say, the concerns that people had 4 months ago still exist. Yeah. We still have a huge affordability issues, the price of homes, the cost of food. All of those things still exist, even if something has leapfrogged to the front of people's minds in terms of the news cycle, and these threats against Canada have become the dominant theme. So how does all that get dealt with? Because those problems don't go away, and there's still going to be a lot of uncertainty and even aggravation in the marketplace. Even if we're resolving some of the issues with the United States, those other issues of affordability will persist.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see it you're already seeing it in consumer behavior in terms of people saying, I'm going to delay big purchases, or because I'm not sure. That sense of precarity, of uncertainty is driving everything, right? For a government at any level, right now it's kind of like a pause period where people are waiting to see what happens with the tariffs and the economic impact that might have. But as you said, those other issues aren't going away. So people are still believing that our health system isn't at capacity that it should be, that I can't get access to, as you've mentioned, a family doctor. And if I have one and I lose it, how am I going to replace it? And so all of those issues remain. And so it almost makes it perhaps more challenging to govern in that kind of environment post-election, because now people are going to be looking to whoever wins this election and saying, okay, you promised a whole bunch of things. You promised a better future. Show me. And so I think we shouldn't equate a shift in the issue set with a shift in the priorities of the public. They still believe life is tough, and they're now worried it's going to get tougher, as opposed to perhaps seeing some relief afterwards.
What do you think are some of the lessons from the last 3 or 4 months in Canadian politics? And because I wonder sometimes, Are there some takeaways, or is this just a really unusual set of events that has happened at just the right time, a perfect storm that has led to this particular outcome, and we're never going to see anything like this again?
Well, I think that the number one lesson I'll say as a researcher is, like, when folks like me say, you know, Prime Minister Trudeau, you are a barrier for people to be considering voting Liberal again. We aren't saying that because we don't like you, which is sometimes what he said about us pollsters, is like, oh, forget the polls, they're not true. No, there's truth there, right? That if Justin Trudeau was still the Prime Minister today, I'm not convinced that the Liberals would be competitive, that this was a barrier for people to getting past it. So the moment he stepped away, the public mindset opened up. And so the lesson there is, you know, research is important, but more importantly is that Canadians are actually far more open-minded than we often give us credit for. We talk a lot about polarization in politics, and there's still more of it today here than I think there has been. But when you could see millions of people basically say overnight that their views have shifted, in part because of domestic political changes, but also because of global ones, it does show that the public's paying attention, right? They are following this stuff, not always closely, but closely enough that it's having an impact on them. So the lesson here is, like, for any of you, for all of you who are business owners in this room, is like, don't assume you know what your customers are thinking one day to the next, because it could change pretty rapidly. And what we're seeing in the shift in the political market, I think, is true in the consumer and labor markets as well.
Yeah, and obviously there was a time when there were a bunch of people who are now going to vote one way, who 6 months ago in opinion polls were saying they were going to vote a different way, right? So those snapshots of what people were thinking at a particular time, those results were not as concrete, and there were people who were saying, well, at the moment, here's how I would vote, but a bunch of things changed, right?
Everything changed. Like, yeah. It's actually, you know, we're going to look back, you know, 10 years from now and look at this election as being one of those, you know, that not the election itself, actually. I think it's the things that happened before it will likely have fundamentally changed the trajectory of the country, right? And to underestimate how important the threat that Donald Trump presented to the public, right? The flying of flags that you see outside people's homes, the sense of patriotism, the fact that, you know, last year we were talking about the fact that the Conservatives could win an overwhelming majority, the Bloc Québécois could form the official opposition, and we could be seeing a referendum in Quebec in 2026 that is less likely now to happen, all because of this external change, right? And we sometimes forget, like, the pandemic had the same effect. It completely changed so much of our behavior and our thinking, and I think that this is another one of those moments. And, you know, in 2024, when Donald Trump was elected, the Financial Times put out a really interesting analysis, and they basically showed that for every national election that was held around the world, and there were a lot of them in 2024, not a single national government that sought re-election saw its support go up, right? And if you think about a lot of the provincial elections in Ontario, in Canada, BC, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, in all those cases in 2024, except in Nova Scotia, did the incumbents' vote share drop. Today, we're seeing a very different, incumbency is actually an asset. We're seeing in Australia, there's an election in Australia happening at the same time as ours, a deeply unpopular incumbent government is now back popular again, right? In part because people's mindset has shifted, and the way they're sort of filtering and thinking about their choices is different today. The threats are different. I always say that voting, I think of voting behavior in a very simple way. That unless you're a deeply partisan person, you always vote the same way. Most people in Canada vote for the party they think is best able to handle the issue they care most about at the time they vote. And that issue they care most about, for many people, has changed. And that's why we're seeing this election turn out likely the way it's going to.
And is it about an issue, or is it just a bit of kind of a reaction to what Donald Trump has done? So I think about, you know, when I go for a run in the mornings, I see all these Canadian flags. My neighbors and other, you know, businesses and homeowners have all these Canadian flags up, and it just feels like First of all, Donald Trump has done more to unite Canadians than any Canadian leader has ever done. But it just feels like there's sort of a moment here where people want to make a statement. And so I wonder, there's an issue here, and I think this party and this leader are the best person to handle the issue, or is it this is a moment where we want to make a certain statement and push back against this outside threat, and the best way symbolically to do that is this?
I think for some, I wouldn't generalize that to all Canadians, because I think if we're going to see still a fairly divided electorate, right? That for about 40%, if you're going to vote Conservative, you're sending a message, but it's that I'm deeply unhappy with the last 10 years, and I want, and Conservative voters are very engaged and want to send that message. And I think for those that are more likely to vote Liberal, I think it's more as you described, where this is an opportunity to send a message, not so much to Donald Trump, because I don't think people are expecting he's going to care all that much about how we vote, but this is my moment to sort of put my, as you said, flag down and say this is where I stand. But I also think that this is, for a lot of Canadians, this election isn't really about public policy. A few people asked me today, do you think the Liberal platform that was released on the weekend, and I think the Conservative one's going to be released today, is going to have much impact? I don't think so, because fundamentally, people are choosing more than probably a number of recent elections, a leader, right? And what's changed is, and I try to always think in terms of stories, that for most of 2023 and 2024, Pierre Poilievre was a very effective, incredibly effective leader of the opposition. But imagine him as like a defense attorney sitting in a courtroom, right? We are the jury, and the defendant's Justin Trudeau. Right? And he's the prosecutor, sorry, he's not the defense lawyer, he's the prosecutor making the case against Justin Trudeau. And he was able to capture the frustration and the anger that we all felt, maybe rightly or wrongly, directed at him. Fast forward to today, and I think that most people aren't angry. They're scared. They're fearful, right? And so what they're actually looking for is, I'm going to use another analogy, like a surgeon or an oncologist, right? That person that you don't care if they live in Rockcliffe Park. You don't care what kind of car they drive. You're actually really excited that they went to Harvard and Oxford, and they wear their Order of Canada pin wherever they go, because you're sick and you need somebody who's the very best at solving that. And by the way, I think Mark Carney, more than Pierre Poilievre, feels like the kind of person who's going to take your hand and say, it's going to be okay. We're going to get you through this. And so that mindset, from scarcity where we wanted somebody to yell for us to precarity where we want somebody to be on our side, is what I think is dividing the electorate like that right now.
I think that's very insightful. Any other things to watch over the final week, or anything else that you think is a lesson or a takeaway from this election campaign, especially around the kind of the mood of Canadians right now and what that might mean for business owners?
I think we're likely to see a high turnout. I think people are far more interested in this election than I've seen in the last two in terms of our numbers, and that could surprise us, right? I think there are still some people who haven't locked in. Like I love having conversations to validate my data, but on the weekend I was visiting family, and I've got I'm Italian, so a very interesting and opinionated group of family members. But you could hear the tension that many of them were struggling with. Like, on the one hand, they would say things like, I really like Mark Carney, but I don't want to reward the Liberals, right? And I do think that for many who may not have voted yet or are still thinking about it, that's the fundamental question that a lot of people are thinking through. And so, again, if Donald Trump says 0 things this week, that might push people into I don't want to reward the incumbents, but...
Has there been a week where Donald Trump has said 0 things?
I'm hopeful, but you never know.
Yeah. What do you think all of what's going on right now, what's been the impact on consumer confidence? And, I just feel there's a high level of uncertainty right now, anxiety. People are worried about the economy, about their jobs. What impact are you seeing that having on confidence?
Yeah, and just to do a plug for the Ottawa Business Journal and the Ottawa Board of Trade, our annual Ottawa Business Growth Survey is going to be out in a few weeks, and we just completed that. And not to scoop that event, and you should all come and hear the results of it, but there's a clear, both consumers and businesses are overwhelmed with a sense of uncertainty, right? I think that's an understatement to say that. So you're seeing in my business and in a lot of other businesses, people just sort of saying, we're going to put a pause on things. We're not going to make big decisions about our future until we kind of have a better sense of that. Now, that may shift away when we realize that this uncertainty is here to stay, and we have to find a way to navigate it and not just delay. But I do think that consumers are clearly indicating a real reluctance to spend a bunch of money. They're not sure that, you know, the sort of the volatility of the markets, people's retirement savings, they feel like are up and down on a daily basis. That's all having an effect, right? Now, on the other hand, you know, consumer behavior is also very much interested in rewarding Canadian businesses, right? There is a genuine push to, you know, I always do surveys and everyone says, I'm going to buy local, I'm going to buy local, and then they don't buy local, right? But this case, there's clear evidence, not only in what people intend to do, but what they're doing in terms of that behavior. Ultimately, I think these are the moments where the most successful businesses, you know, thrive, right? Because, and I tell my team this all the time, is that fundamentally, regardless of what business you're in, we're all in the hospitality business, right? We are all there to make the lives of our clients or customers easier. And so that's more important than ever, is kind of my advice. And those that go the extra mile, that understand that their customers, their consumers, their patients, whoever it is you deal with, are just feeling uneasy, and that little bit that you can do to, you know, make them smile, make them feel warm is going to make a big difference, I think, in allowing you to compete with those that you do in your business.
I want to talk a little bit about your experiences as a business owner in Ottawa. So you started this company just over 10 years ago. Is it 11? 15 now?
Yeah.
Okay, geez.
Yeah.
And you always have had a downtown office. I know you have days where people work from home, like many businesses, but you've maintained a downtown office, so you care about downtown Ottawa. You've served on the Board of Trade. So what have your experiences been like as a business owner with an office in downtown Ottawa as we've undergone this period of change, particularly around, you know, fewer people coming downtown and lots of uncertainty about the future of downtown Ottawa? Yeah,
I mean, I'm a huge advocate for revitalizing our downtown, giving it the life that it had back. Knowing that I'm never going to be able to likely tell my team to come to the office every single day because our business doesn't necessarily need that. But I remember the days, you know, months after the pandemic ended, where you'd walk down Spark Street and there was literally nobody there, right? And how devastating that felt. And so I never want us to return back to that. And what's really interesting is that, you know, Ottawa's a huge city. You know more than anybody else how big this city is and how we are like a city of cities in very many ways. But regardless of where you live in this city, even if you live in the farthest reaches in the rural parts of this community, you still think that a vibrant downtown is important, right? We want to be able to come here. So I think it's an essential thing. I think we all have to sort of figure out and do our own part in encouraging it. And I've seen a change even in the last year that I've been coming into the office every day, that there is life's coming back, right? And that things seem to be more focused. But as a business owner, I still want my team members to feel that it's safe to come downtown, that there's a reason to come. And so the more that we can do together to encourage that, the easier it's going to be for me to encourage it, because I think it's also important for our culture as a team to come together from time to time. And are you know, whether it's your employees from an anecdotal perspective or from any research you've done, where do you think people's minds are at on hybrid work or
working in the office full-time or working from home full-time? Because I've always thought that over time we would drift back towards gathering in workplaces, maybe not 5 days a week, but that people want to get together. They want to be around other people. They don't want to spend their whole day at home. It was appealing for a while, but what are you seeing on that?
So I think fundamentally it's not about what is gathering or not. It's just simply that people want flexibility, right? And that doesn't mean that every single day I get to work from home or I have to go to the office. But it's the idea that if I can, and not all workplaces allow that kind of flexibility, but if I needed to, I could make that choice. That if there's a snowstorm, nobody's going to judge me for not trekking into the office when there's 30 centimeters of snow outside. Or if I've got to bring my kid to the doctor, I have that ability. I think that's what the pandemic basically did, is it took what people dreamed of, right? Having a fairly flexible environment, and it made it a reality for a while. It allowed people to do both, live their life and work. And so that's, I think, if you can find that balance, it's perfect. Now, I also have seen the effect of having my team, and we have an office in Halifax and Toronto and Ottawa, and so we don't have the luxury of being able to bring the full team together on a regular basis. And so it's always a challenge in doing that, but it becomes even greater challenge when certain team members may not see each other for like 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And so finding ways of creating, like we have, for example, at Abacus, on Mondays we have an all-team meeting, and it's encouraged that everybody in the Ottawa office come to the Ottawa office and hold that meeting together and stay together for a while, because otherwise, like, you can't build a relationship with somebody over a Zoom or Teams call, right? And I think that's very clear. That being said, there is still a desire for flexibility, and I don't think that's going to go away.
Do you have any other advice for business owners at this time of uncertainty and anxiety?
I not more than I think I've shared. I think it comes down to just, focusing on what makes your business excellent. It's obvious to say, but I think it is really important in these environments. And I'm just a huge fan of just being hospitable. Like, if you haven't read this book, I'm going to just do a plug for a book. Danny Meyer, he's the founder of Shake Shack and is a restaurateur in New York City. He wrote a book called Setting the Table, and if any of you are in hospitality, you should read it, but every business owner should read it, because it basically lays out how important it is to put your, not, everyone says you put your customer first. Well, that's not what he says. He says you put your team first, and then your suppliers first, and then your customer will come and be well served. Because if you're serving those other stakeholders in your ecosystem, then the customer's automatically going to be well treated. And he describes what a successful team or business is like. And he uses the analogy of moths and a light bulb. And for those of us old enough to remember incandescent light bulbs, the ones that got hot, he basically says there's 2 elements of a successful team, any business. He says the moths are attracted to the light because of how bright it is, right? But they stay because of how warm that is, right? And if you think about your own business, your own team, those 2 elements are fundamental. You've got to be bright. You've got to have something that people want and that they talk about, and it becomes part of the conversation. But if they show up and you're not warm and you're not a great place to be, either because in terms of your business or team, they're not going to stay. And so I come back to that as being fundamental in these kind of difficult periods where this is a buyer's market. They have choice, and both, I think, from a labor perspective and from a customer perspective.
That's a great analogy. As you look forward for your business, for your life in Ottawa, for the future of our city and our country, I know you're a positive, optimistic person, but there are a lot of headwinds at the moment. Do you still feel that optimism? What's your own personal outlook? What are you feeling heading into this next chapter?
Yeah, I am. For anyone who knows me, I'm like an eternal optimist, maybe too much. So every time my spouse says, like, oh God, I'm like, no, but look, this is the upside. And she's like, stop it, right? Like, she just wants someone to feel sometimes the stress that we feel in our lives. Look, I think I think being Canadian is we are the luckiest. You always say that, you know, to have been born in Ottawa and to be grown up here. You feel lucky. I feel lucky about that. We have everything the world wants. So there is no reason for us, relative to everybody else, to feel dread or worry. That doesn't mean it's not going to be easy or there's difficult times ahead. What keeps me optimistic is still of the belief, and this is where my science brain goes, is that I would still much rather be born today than at any point in history. And that's not where most people think, mind you. When you ask Canadians, would you rather be born today or in 1950? 70% say they would rather be born in 1950, okay? And so
70%?
70%, right?
Yeah.
Including half of those.
I'm in the 30%.
I am too.
Yeah.
Right? Because everything tells us, whether it's medicine, whether it's quality of life, whether it's
human rights,
it is absolutely a better time to be alive. Now, it doesn't mean it's perfect, and there's not a lot of things we need to do. So how do we get other people to feel that way? That's what drives me as a market researcher and a public opinion, is how do we get more people to feel optimistic? Now, we know, both genetically and psychologically, that there are people predisposed to seeing the glass half empty, right? So how do we get them to view the world in that way is something that drives me, because I want more, because I think our politics is always going to be better. I think our world will be better if people recognize that there's actually a lot of progress being made. And we have a natural tendency to have a negativity bias, but I just want to kind of push us out of it. So, I mean, I didn't give you actual examples of why I'm optimistic, because I just am, but look, I think there's lots of things that we need to be good about. And again, I come back to what you said. For good or bad, Donald Trump has activated something in us where literally overnight, the moment he started talking about us becoming the 51st state, Canadian optimism jumped, right? It's still not high. Only 30% of Canadians think the country's headed in the right direction. But 4 months ago, it was 12%. Again, low. So it's doubled. Still lots of room to grow. It's still lower than it was in the first few weeks of the global pandemic. But I think leaders in this room require us to be more optimistic. And I think other people will follow.
Absolutely. I got to tell you, I say this to my kids all the time, and they're probably sick of it, but there's never been a better time to be alive, and I think all the data supports that. We live we live better lives than the richest monarchs in the world lived 150, 200 years ago. So I'm actually jealous of my kids that they're going to get to see things after I'm gone that I wish I could be around to see, just in terms of the growth and development and the rapid pace of change and technology. So it's a great time to be alive.
I just get another plug to a book called Upswing. I'm reading this book by Robert Putnam, and if you have ever heard of Robert Putnam, he wrote the book Bowling Alone, which talked about the decline of community and social capital. He basically went back and said, we are at a moment in our history, and this doesn't sound very optimistic, but bear with me for a moment, that's very much like it was in the late 1800s, okay? When you looked at the United States in the 1800s, deep inequality, deep polarization, and he basically argues that what happened next was this upswing on every metric, whether it was a reduction in inequality, an increase in community, all started to happen at that bottom, right? So the optimism in me is let's hope as bad as it gets. And what this will hopefully do is force us to be less individualist, and that's what a scarcity mindset does, is it forces us to be me versus you. And what Trump has done is it created a much more collective, I think, sense of who we are, so that we maybe start working together again. And I think that's my hope for the next stage of our history.
Absolutely. I mentioned, just real quick before we wrap up, you're also on the board of the Ottawa Riverkeeper, and I know they have a big event coming up that you wanted to talk about.
May 22nd, I believe, I hope I got that right, is our gala. It's our most important fundraising event. If you believe that this river that we share is essential to our health and our well-being, and as a cyclist, our joy riding around it, I hope you'll consider coming and supporting this great organization. And if you can't, send us some money. We're growing our programs. And if you haven't visited River House, which is that beautiful new not new, but renovated house on the Ottawa River. Please come by. It's an amazing swimming hole in the summer months, and there's lots of fun programs if you've got kids and stuff about to learn more about the river. So thanks for giving me the chance to do that.
Okay. David, thank you. Listen, this was a great discussion, and it's always amazing to hear your insights into everything from your unique vantage point. And thank you also for the leadership that you have shown in our community, the work that you've done to support the Board of Trade and other causes in our city. And I got to tell you, as your friend and former business coach, it really has been a joy and a pleasure for me to see just how well you've done with Abacus and the great company you've built, and how you have evolved into, a highly respected voice on Canadian public opinion.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you. Thank you.
David Coletto, thank you.
We can afford 3 mics now, Mark. It's good. Listen, I want to take a second. Good morning, everyone. Michael Kern from the Ottawa Business Journal. I want to take a second to thank you, David. So many insights. I think a good pollster will make us think about why and why it matters. You made me think of a brief experience last night. It was at the Orleans Legion at an advance poll. It was pouring rain. It's Easter Monday, and yet there's 150 people voting at 7:15 at night. And I was thinking about that, David, and looking around the room and thinking this is a great demonstration of democracy at work, but you just made me reflect a little bit more about what that suggests. And to me, the takeaway is that Canadians are engaged. I think this is a consequential election, and that they're informed, right? So these are great things happening in our country, and we're going to get a good result and respect democracy. So on behalf of His Worship Mayor Mark Sutcliffe, the Ottawa Board of Trade, OBJ, big round of applause for David Coletto today. There you go. And David, we're going to present you with a little gift. If you could come forward, and this is all local products presented by Eamon Harnden. And I'll have Eamon Harnden come up. Where's our representative? I have a name here, Francois Rousseau. Here we are. Thanks once again to Francois and Eamon Harnden for providing our speaker gift. Big round of applause again for David Coletto. Thank you to Eamon Harnden. David, I know you're carrying a big, large basket, but we also have, is Miguel here from Casino de Lac Limi? Where's Miguel? Going to have you draw a business card for a door prize. Who's the lucky person here? Carl Baldoff. Carl, come see us afterwards, and we'll provide that $200 gift certificate to the Casino Lac Limi. A couple wrap-up comments, and we'll have you on your way. First off, just a couple OBJ items. Our spring issue is out. It's our fastest-growing companies issue. 20 of the fastest-growing companies as measured by revenue growth over a 3-year period. And today's caterer, where's Derek? From my catering, I saw him in the room. Here he is, right here, is number 3 on that list. Think about that.